Guild Wars 3 was just announced, and there's a whole lot to talk about, but what I'm going to talk about today is one big question. When is Guild Wars 3? Not the release date, which we don't know yet, though we do know there's a beta coming fall 2027, but when in the Guild Wars timeline the game takes place. We've received a whole lot of info over the past 3 days since the announcement, some of it contradictory, and we'll go through it all in order. Firstly, to ground ourselves in the timeline, the main Guild Wars calendar is centered around the BE, or before Exodus, and AE, after Exodus convention, referring to the Exodus of the Gods, which is when they withdrew from the world, for the first time at least, following the fall of Abaddon. The start of Guild Wars 1, or pre-Searing, is at around 1070 AE, and the last of the Guild Wars Beyond events wraps up around 1079 AE. There are a few other events in Guild Wars 1 that are outside of this timeline, such as the Battle of Jahai, the Tengu Accords, the Rise of the White Mantle, all from the bonus mission pack, as well as the Annihilator April Fool's Day quest, which takes place during the Third Guild War, but those are all small individual missions outside of the main game. Guild Wars 2 is set about 250 years after the end of Guild Wars 1, with the base campaign starting in 1325 AE, and the latest content for the Visions of Eternity quest, though there is still stuff being released, begins around 1338 AE. Guild Wars 3 is, chronologically speaking, a prequel. The first timeline indicators we received were from the announcement trailer and the accompanying press releases, which tell us that we're in Ore and it's not fully developed yet.
Vast frontier, this land of Ore.
Ore, by the time of Guild Wars 1, is a large, predominantly human nation that gets destroyed before the main part of the game takes place. The press releases also explicitly state that the game takes place over 1,000 years before the first game, which is further cemented by this part of the trailer.
At the gods who hold dominion over all.
This is important, and I'm pausing here, because we know that the gods in the Guild Wars franchise are not static. They're not constants of the universe like in most real-world religions, and they're not omnipotent. I mean, look at these three guys. Doom, Abaddon, Balthazar, all three of them fell from godhood. 2 losing their godhood around the part of the timeline that Guild Wars 3 is set in. Godhood can be lost, and godhood can be gained.
I am now a god. You're a god. I deserve this.
And that brings me to our first zooming in of the timeline. The initial info, there being humans in Ore and Guild Wars 3 being at least 1,000 years before Guild Wars 1, brings the timeline to here. Which gods are on this tapestry helps us further narrow down where Guild Wars 3 takes place. Here are my notes on the tapestry from right after the announcement trailer dropped, along with the dervish god forms from Guild Wars 1. 3 of these figures are pretty obvious from the get-go. Duena has all the usual hallmarks of her wings and regalia, Lissa has her classic dancer with multiple faces look, and Melandru looks like a tree thing. We also see Abaddon with his characteristic Marganite mask and tentacles, which sets this before the fall of Abaddon / the Exodus of the Gods, and then Balthazar there on the right, who looks close enough to his usual depictions. The only one I was a little unsure on was the God of Death, which has a look that could be either Doom or Grinth, since they've had a lot of different looks over the years. When it comes to scythes, hoods, and skulls, there's a lot of options that still look cool, and it's understandable that they'd be experimenting. Abaddon being there puts us as likely before the Exodus, though Guild Wars 3's story including the Exodus isn't completely out of the picture, and Grinth vs. Doom determines how far away from the Exodus we are, as well as how far along Orient civilization is. There is more info on Grinth vs. Doom to come, and we'll get to that shortly. The races that we see in the trailer are Human, Azuran, and Coden for sure, and one figure who is likely a dwarf since when she stands up, she's about the same height as the Azura. A throwaway line in Guild Wars 2 Janther Wilds mentions that ancient Coden headed to Ore, so that doesn't narrow things down for us, nor does the presence of Azurans or dwarves, since they've been around for a while. Humans, they're an invasive species who arrived in Ore around 205 BE and are not native to the world of Tyria, but we already touched on that earlier. On Sunday morning, a new IGN interview with ArenaNet dropped, and studio head Colin Johansson mentioned that
and we're setting this game 1,200 years before Guild Wars 1, just before the first Guild War breaks out, just after one of the gods has been deposed.
Which kind of raised more questions than answers, as the earliest deposition we know of would be Grinth supplanting Doom, but that would be around 48 BE, almost 150 years before the first Guild War, and 1200 years back would put us at around 130 BE, even earlier. Colin later clarified in a comment on Reddit that he misspoke, and it does take place after Grinth takes Doom's place, but before the Exodus, and thus also before the First Guild War. So ultimately, that leaves us with this time period, 48 BE to 1 BE. Of course, there is some wiggle room here. As anyone who's studied ancient history in the real world knows, historians can be pretty inaccurate. You can't always trust the numbers that they give. Some of them like to exaggerate, some of them miss a few things, some of them make things up. But ultimately, I think this gives ArenaNet a very nice timeline to work with and a really interesting area to explore in Guild Wars history. And this time period has some interesting implications for Guild Wars 3. The first big implication is that it's before Abaddon gave magic to the races of Tyria, and that could mean that the spellcasters we see are different than the classic Guild Wars spellcasters we've been able to play in 1 and 2. It would be a little strange for ArenaNet to toss out some of those really iconic Guild Wars spellcasters like the Mesmer, Necromancer, and Elementalist. So one of my theories of how they might handle this is having the gods gift individuals with their types of magic, so that early Necros might come from the followers of Grinth, Mesmers might come from followers of Lissa, and monks might be from followers of Duena, or something of the like. There is some precedent for this, with Dismina as the first follower of Grinth, and the Druids of Melandru, though for them that was more of a curse. As of Guild Wars 2, we know there are plenty of other sources of magic, such as the Spirits of the Wild, and that may be the spirits that these Veil Wardens we play as channel, kind of like the Proto-Ritualists mentioned in some of the Guild Wars factions' background information. The second big implication is that we once again have a Guild Wars game that does not cover any of the Guild Wars, 3 actual wars that happened in universe. There's nothing wrong with that, it's just kind of funny. The first Guild War starts around 100 AE, which is pretty far out of the timeline, and there is fighting between guilds that's stated to be going on in the press releases, but this is a 3-for-3 batting average for the Guild Wars games not really covering the titular Guild Wars, with our only content in that period being the April Fool's Day quest in Guild Wars 1. That quest, Annihilator, and its sequel quest are only available 1 day a year and are Terminator parodies that have you as a time-traveling Special Forces riot cop taking on a golem that wants to kill Gwen's mother. In the first one, you end up teleporting into the middle of the Guild Wars between the Ascalonians and the Cretans. The third big implication is that in Guild Wars 3, the gods will be more involved than they've been in any of the previous entries. They were tangentially involved in Guild Wars 1, essentially present but not interfering beyond giving minor bonuses and favor. And in Guild Wars 2, they were even less involved, having kind of left the world even more, unless you count Balthazar, after he lost his godhood and went on a rampage in Path of Fire. And finally, Resurrection is back, baby. It's a thing again. Friendship ended with Permadeath Daddy Doom. Catch me using Res Signet, because with Grinth here, it is in vogue. When Alicia drops dead again, we're going to be picking her back up. Jokes aside, Resurrection was a canonical thing in Guild Wars 1 and no longer present in Guild Wars 2 following the later, more complete Exodus of the Gods. Fun fact about the Gods of Death, Doom did not believe in Resurrection, hence why he's more of the permanently destroy you type, and he makes an appearance for permabans in Guild Wars 1, and Doom's Covenant being broken in Guild Wars 1. But Grinth, however, did let people get resurrected, and that lasted pretty much until the gods left again during the Elder Dragon's Awakening. So, in Guild Wars 2, Resurrection is not really a canon thing, outside of a few small exceptions. Canonically, when you're fully dead in Guild Wars 2, you're actually just knocked out, and the few exceptions are noteworthy moments in the story. All in all, I'm excited for Guild Wars 3. I think it'll be great like both 1 and 2. I think the part of the timeline that it's in is really interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing where ArenaNet takes it. If you enjoyed this video, if you want to see more, or if you just want to help out a tiny creator, please leave a like, subscribe, or even link this video to your friends. If you're interested in seeing some of my fun little Guild Wars 1 and 2 meme videos I've made over the years, they should be showing up on screen now. Thanks for watching, and have an outstanding day.